Mortals, welcome mere mortalites to another round of the Mere Mortals Musings. Today you've got Kyrin, and just Kyrin. Juan is not here. He is adventuring about in Australia with his young family. And so you have me here on the 22nd of November 2023, live as always at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So, man, what am I going to talk about today? I've got to do a live one just by myself. Well, there's a couple of things I wanted to just do a little bit of housekeeping at the start here before going over, I guess, general life in Australia that I've experienced. So last time Juan was away, I did a childhood one about, Australian wildlife and childhood and things like this. Today I'm going to be talking about, I guess, general events in my life. So it'll be half of me, my life, and then in Australia, half about Australian culture and observations that I've made whilst living here for my 31 years. So just the housekeeping, just want to reiterate that we're only going to be doing one real episode a week. Juan's still doing his Mere Mortals in Motion, so there's small tiny ones throughout the week, so technically two, I guess, here. The book reviews are live on a Thursday, 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. I have now hopefully hook those up to be able to do those live in the podcasting apps as well. So if you just want to listen to the audio, you can do it from there. The Value for Value show is on hiatus probably until about January. So that's just all the housekeeping there. And let's just jump into, I suppose, my life as an Aussie. So I suppose we got to start at the beginning. Where was I born? How was I born? Well, I think we all know how I was born. I was born in 1992 here in Brisbane, Australia. So my mum's side of the family, mum's from New Zealand, and she grew up in kind of like a farming type household. She's got 4 brothers. 3 of them are actually flying into Brisbane tomorrow, and I'm picking them up from the airport. So that'll be nice and fun. And all of her side of the family is basically all over in New Zealand. And then my dad's family is mostly located in Newcastle, also a relatively big family. He's got, I believe, 3 sisters and 2 brothers. So a whole assortment of cousins and etc. people definitely in my family. But I suppose for our family, we've always been rather closely located. And because we're here in Brisbane, I had one uncle here for most of my life, but even he's not here anymore. So we've always, although we've had a large family on both sides, we have been somewhat cloistered and sequestered here in Brisbane. That's not to say we didn't know them. We kind of did a period, I think, of like every year or every third year, we would alternate between going to New Zealand for Christmas and then going to Newcastle and things like this. So we've always had a big family, but just not very close to them. So this personally for me has always fitted in with my general personality. I've always enjoyed having not too many people around. I'm more of a loner. I'm more of an introvert. So big family functions and get-togethers is not my forte. Very much the same, I would say, for my mum and dad as well. The exception would be my brother. He was always a bit more extroverted, and so he was born mostly 6 years after me, 5 3/4. And he was always a bit more extroverted, but even now he was just saying his girlfriend and she's got a large family, and then it's like, oh God, Christmas gifts, oh God, Christmas, family, all get together. There's so much things going on. So maybe even for him it was suited his personality as well. So in terms of just growing up, like my childhood, and I'm going to split this into 4 separate sections of my childhood, of my life, I suppose. And it was always sunshine, lollipops, rainbows, literally sunshine here in Brisbane, lollipops, because I had a massive sweet tooth, and then rainbows just because rainbows are pretty. And I was never in real want. So I think I've reiterated this tons of times, but my mum and dad were just amazing, amazing parents, strict, but not too strict, comforting, but also getting me to push my boundaries. Focusing on the right side of things, letting me be free, but also watching what I'm doing. Like I think they just did a marvelous, marvelous job. Obviously, having me as a child makes it easy to be a great parent. No, I'm joking. But you do get the sense that, okay, like my childhood was amazing. Good friends, sleepovers, school was, primary school was just, you're just there to have fun, basically learn. So as long as you've I've got a decent enough IQ, I think. So just learning during that whole phase, nothing was too hard for me. Not even any personal tragedies or deaths in the family to people that I knew. A couple of my grandparents passed away, but once again, like I said, I didn't really know them. So that whole my childhood up until about the age of 13 was just really fantastic, I suppose, till the end of primary school. So that was, I guess, my childhood. How this relates to Australia, well, my parents were middle class, diligent workers. They were both teachers at high schools. My dad doing English, my mum doing music. And I'd say they largely fulfilled the Aussie dream, which is something that you're probably going to start hearing from Juan a lot more, which is, buying a house, having a stable life, having, a good school for your kid to go to, just growing up without any crazy, ridiculous things like you'll hear about, topsy-turvy stuff happening in Ukraine or in, some of the Arab countries, or even just in like general parts of America and places like, just living here in Brisbane, which is a mid-tier city, 2 million people. It was just like idyllic. And I think it still is largely idyllic here. And so it's like owning a house, adding a bit extra on top of that. That's kind of all Australians really want. There's no real hunger nor desire, I feel, that you would maybe see in the American or entrepreneurial culture, which is really go-getter, really getting after it and that sort of thing. So I think that still very much is the focus here. When I go onto like the Australian Reddit and hear people complaining about things, because that's what you do on Reddit, right? And what they complain about is just like, I can't afford a home, like it's impossible. And they're not talking about owning 7 homes. They're not talking about really, I want this and I deserve this and this and this. That's just like, no, if they're struggling, it's just because they're struggling to have what you would call a relatively normal life, I guess. And I think that's just kind of Australian culture. The funny thing on that is it's still very much the focus here on owning a house. That's very much the Australian dream, backyard and that sort of stuff. And I was doing some rough maths with my dad for when he was buying properties in the kind of like 70s, 80s, maybe even into it would be more into like the 90s and early 2000s. And just the rough math that he was doing, there's not that much difference between the house prices then and now compared to just like the average salary or wage. And it's just some people are feeling the hurt because of inflation and stuff like that. But by and large, I don't think it's that much different. But still, the Australian dream, all of that stuff, I think is pretty typical. I think it's pretty typical to have a family with a house. Maybe they're renting, but maybe they own it themselves. And that was my life. That was my middle class Australian life. And the extra part, the extra houses that I was talking about, or properties, we'll get more onto that in a little bit later. So I suppose that gets onto the next section of my life, which was the teenage years. I think this was probably a typical experience for most. It's completely new school, a new friend group. On the outside, I think you'd say I did well. So what happened was I went to primary school really close to my house where I lived, and then I went to a high school a bit further out, which is where I met Juan on that first day of high school. We've talked about that in an episode not too long ago, and that was a bit more out of the way because it was kind of like a special school. It had an accelerated learning program, which my parents put me in. And so on the outside, I'd say, you'd probably say Kyrin in his teenage years, I'm saying up to, about until I turned 20, 21. I lived the idyllic life, I guess, or you'd say like on the outside, I did well. I graduated Ducks of Springwood State High School. I kind of won soccer trophies and was Players Player of the Year, Club Player of the Year, or not Club Player of the Year, Players Player and Coaches Player. We did well. I was a good soccer player. I was generally near the top of the team. Graduated uni, graduated high school, graduated uni, did well with there, got a scholarship from uni, had solid friends, stayed out of trouble, and just slid into my very first job as a vacation student, and then pretty much slid into my first real proper job of a graduate engineer working for Rio Tinto in the coal mines here in Australia. And it's kind of like the apple of society's eye, right? That's how you'd maybe say that my life went in my teenage years. But Jesus Christ, like the internal turmoil was horrendous. And I blame pretty much all of it on hormones. I don't think there was anything that could have changed differently if I'd been in a different environment. If I'd had some better ways of thinking, I think that could have helped. But internally, I was not really happy. I had I'd say pretty miserable teenage years. And I think this happens to a lot of people. It's kind of hard to tell. I like to ask people this because I don't really know many people who would voluntarily go back to their teens. I think there's a couple, but it seems to be the rare. And most people seem to be like, that was just a turbulent, awful time. And yeah, pretty much I put the blame on hormones. So I hated how I looked. I hated how I felt. I hated how much social anxiety I had. I hated my dad for some real, like, no apparent reason. He was the most awesome, incredible dad, but I still just had like this hatred. It was apparent superficially because I can't lie. I'm really bad at containing facial and expressions like that. So when people would ask me how I was going, or you'd just look at my general body language, it was all like hunched over and mopey. And I had long hair at the time in high school, so I actually grew it out to basically cover my eyes. So I was kind of seeing through this little triangle. And I think that very much reflected the inner portion of me, which was I wanted to hide. I wanted to not be seen by society. I wanted to kind of crawl into a little hole and for people to forget about me and not make comments and not say things to me because I mostly like bottled just all of this. I'd call it a mini depression. After reading a book like The Noonday Demon by Andrew Solomon, which is all about depression and goes into it really deeply. It's a massively thick book. I wouldn't say I ever experienced like a full-on depression or anything like that, but I certainly felt that I had something, a mini side of that. And like I said, I could tolerate living. I could go on. I never had any suicidal thoughts or anything like that, but there would be times where I would have kind of like panic attacks or emotional outbursts or things like this where it was like, oh, okay, yeah, there's a bit of internal stuff going on there. So this is not Australian per se, but I just have a tremendous sympathy for teenagers. Like I said, I don't think there's anything particularly uniquely Australian about that experience I just gave. Teenagers, just like, damn, what a shitty time. And so when I see teenagers acting like assholes or being gossipy or just being like general scumbags or ratbags, like a lot of them are, and there's nice ones as well, but you see the scumbags and the ratty ones. I generally just feel empathy for them, or just be like, damn, they're probably just trying to do the best they can. Perhaps the only difference is that I don't think we have to be adults too quickly here in Australia. There's no rites of passage of, now you're a man sort of thing, or there's no real bad things that happen. That our social safety net is wonderful. It's pretty amazing. So this is one of the only things where I'll give the government some credit here, because education, necessities, NDIS, which is our kind of healthcare, the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which my mum is on at the moment with her Alzheimer's, like they take really, really good care of people. And so if you do have, a sick mum, or, you're the son or daughter of a single mum or a single dad and they get sick, I do think you get taken care of pretty well. Once again, I'm generalizing here. I know there's portions of Australia which are lower on the socioeconomic income and things like this. I know there's people have their individual tragedies and individual hardships, but I don't feel like anyone needs to grow up too quickly here. By and large, you can you can get through into your like kind of like late teens, early 20s where you don't even have to really know about money. You know, I joined university when I was 18. So 18, 19, 20 was and 21, like my age years of being at university. And that was just a time where I didn't even know how much my engineering degree cost, really. I had a rough idea, but the government can pay for that. You get a loan from them, and it's like a really cheap loan, or used to be. Nowadays, it's kind of jacked up a little bit about how much they add on top of it in terms of interest. But you know, you didn't need to really know about money. I didn't really do my taxes until I was like 21 when I moved out of home and started becoming a real adult. So I think that's just one of those times where it's like, yeah, okay, Australian life is pretty damn good. And once again, even though I had a turbulent inner world, everything was still going pretty good for me. And that was just like nice. It was nice to be set up in that way for, I suppose, some maybe more hardships that would come later in my life. But I didn't really have any emotional baggage, I feel, or anything that was seriously wrong. It was just like, this is a nice, pretty good life. And even though I might have bitched about it at the time, I certainly look back and go, you know, once again, I think parents did a great job. I think Australia is a wonderful place to live. And so growing up like that was certainly very, very nice. I'll keep going on, I suppose, about the next two sections of my life shortly, but I'm going to jump onto the Boostagram Lounge. This is going to be a slightly shorter episode just compared to the normal ones because Juan's not here. So going on to the Boostagram Lounge, for those who don't know, a Boostagram is a message you can send in directly to the show as a thank you of support for us continuing to create these episodes, to continuing to put out the podcast, and as a way, a feedback mechanism to know how we're going for the show, know if topics that we're talking about are relating to people or connecting and things like this. So this is where we'll direct you to go into a Podcasting 2.0 app, which is where you can do most of these things. Places like Fountain or Podfans or Cast-O-Matic or Podcast Guru or Podverse, or what else is there? You can go to the podcast index directly. You can go to Podfriend. There's a whole bunch of them. There's a whole bunch of Breeze. There's a whole bunch of them. So if you go to meremortalspodcast.com/support, you'll see all the details there about that. So we only really got one in for this week, and this is from, as usual, Petar the Slav. Actually, no, I've got another one just coming in, live one here. I'll call out the live one first because this is kind of cool. So this is from @Starky, and he just says, good content, 10 sats sent using Fountain. Thank you, my friend. He wouldn't be listening to this live, I don't think, because this isn't live on Fountain, but there we go. Good timing. Thank you very much, Starky. So the big one that we have for this week, the one and only really, is from Petar the Slav, and he says, boosting your own show under a fake fan identity is dishonest, and that is immoral. Boosting your own show under your real name is just pathetic if it's to gain ranking in the algorithm. Most people have decided it's better to live a virtuous life and nor be immoral or pathetic. Living a virtuous life is rewarding and incentivizing on its own. 25,000. Woo! Baller. Sats sent using Fountain. Thank you very much, Peter. Yeah, look, it was good to just call that out. This is one of those times where it's like, obviously the thought went through my head, and it's gone through my head multiple times of, oh, I could do that. Never seriously, never with the intention of actually doing that. And I think I wonder if most people have the thought, because once again, this is where it's like getting into morality. And he says, you know, it's most people decide it's better to live a virtuous life. And I think that's probably the same thing. I think a lot of people will see an opportunity to do something, which is maybe a bit in the gray area, or something which is a bit pathetic. And they go, no, I'm going to choose not to do that, which I think is by definition good. Whereas if you don't even think about it and you just don't do it, that's kind of just gray area or something like that. So I think that's a good thing to call out. Thank you very much for that, Peter. And look, there hasn't been that much boost lately. Obviously, I've taken some time off to just chill out a little bit, to reflect on not necessarily the show, but just, you know, my own life, my mum's life, how things are going at the moment. And so, you know, we're not putting as much value out as we normally do, and so we get less value in return, which is the value for value way. And so we do very much thank you, Peter, for boosting in like that. It's it does help keep the show going, keep us motivated. You kept us motivated through a long period of time, so it's really a blessing to have you, mate. Thank you so much. So I'll go on to the next two sections here, which were, I suppose, I've labeled knowing myself and then solidification and stagnation. So I just want trying to think if there was anything that I really missed about my teenage years. So just some funny things. I was a small gangly kid. I was a pretty cute kid. Had like golden rosy hair, probably up until turned into like this mousy brown curly hair. Probably about when I hit my teens, that was when it started to become a bit more browner, and I grew it out really long, which was a really dumb thing to do because my face is just very long. So when I had like this long hair dragging from it, it just, everything about me looked long. There's some photos somewhere, I don't have them myself, of myself at around 15, and I almost looked anorexic. I was so that I just played soccer, so I was very much into the running and cardio sort of things, and that was a lot of body image issues back then as well. So the next 5 to 7 years was from about the age of 21 through to 27, 28, 26, something like that. These were all about experience and change. I got, a girlfriend, which turned into girlfriends eventually. I had a job, which turned into jobs eventually. I had a friend, which turned into friends. I had a home, and then multiple different homes. And when I say homes with the S, is just implying that I went through a series of successions of doing this. So I myself moved up to Mackay, which is North Queensland, about in the middle of Queensland, and then on the east coast, and then where I worked was inland in a coal mine. And I moved up there. I was there for about 3 years, and so that was until the end of 2016 was when I quit that job. I did pretty well at the job, I think. I didn't get fired or made redundant during a turbulent period of a downturn in the coal industry and mining in general, so I must have done okay or something like that. And I ended up leaving because I just felt like I was stagnating in life. I was just kind of like moseying along, and it almost felt like it was starting to pass me by. And so I ended up quitting. I moved back to here in Brisbane, which is where I also left my first girlfriend. Came back to Brisbane, and this was where I started living in a couple of different places here. I had a studio apartment I rented. Then I was in West End, which is right by the river, whilst also alternating between my parents' house and seeing them a lot. I tried out a whole bunch of different jobs. I painted my parents' house for them, and Dad kind of compensated me for that as well. And I did a kind of lousy job because I painted about half of it in terms of the walls and ceilings, but I didn't do any of the architraves and the gloss painting. And then I just left for Latin America, and so they had a kind of half-painted house for, a year and a half, 2 years, basically. Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Dad. And so everything about this was just change and experience. I, was more in the dating scene. I traveled around to, like 8 different countries. I fulfilled that dream of traveling to South America. And then even when I came back from that, when I was, I'm going to say 27, so this was, around 2019, I got back from a big trip, and it's like, okay, am I going to go back into engineering? I don't really want to do that. How about this podcasting stuff? I'll just do it for the moment whilst I'm still in this kind of in-between phase. And then COVID happened, and it was like, yeah, well, I mean, might as well just keep doing this and see how we go with it. And so that got me into, I suppose, the end of 2020 roughly, where it was like a lot of self-development and growth. And so all of this was a rather tremendous growth period for me, I'd say. Physically, I got strong. So I, joined the gym, got over my body issues, and just found out what I loved doing, which was calisthenics and handstands. I achieved my ultimate bald form by finally getting rid of my hair. So even back in when I was in high school, you could already see it was starting to recede a bit on the temples here, and so I always was a little bit self-conscious about it. It's like, got to try and grow it a little bit longer and cover it up a bit, because on a windswept day, you'd really see like, oh, he's really starting to recede there. So that was in 2019. That was when I just shaved it all off and was like, all right, I'm just going to go bald. Or, I don't really have an option here. I never really looked at doing hair transplants or anything like that. And so that was just another like tick of the box of like, all right, that's another worry, another thing I don't really care about, solved. Emotionally, I think I shared a bunch of the kind of unhelpful BS. I learned a lot of things of coping, of how I thought the world worked, of particularly related to interactions with women. I just developed a lot of mindsets which were helpful when I was socially awkward and very, very anxious, and got me to overcome that, but weren't helpful later on. And so this was a period of shedding a lot of the, learning those or unlearning those, I guess. And some of them still stick around, and you'll hear about those in my my goals and monthly goals and things like that. Mentally, kind of overcame a lot of fears, overcame the fear of talking to women, overcame the fear of traveling to a different country where I didn't speak the language. It's like, what's going to happen when I land there? How am I going to feed myself? I'm not going to be able to talk. Someone's going to kill me and rob me. What's going to happen? Nothing of that. Well, I did get robbed, but but nothing really, really bad happened. So even the bad thing was kind of like, oh, okay, well, that wasn't too bad. And so mentally was getting over a lot of those fears, of the fear of dancing as well, things like that. Philosophically, I think I started to create a framework for how life actually works, of what actually matters. And so for things like this, we've done full episodes on this, but it's things like, I don't necessarily believe in karma, but definitely being good and creating those kind of unseen, hidden connections with people that tends to come around again. Aiming for the long term and enjoying the process of creating something. There's the love of money is kind of the root of all evil. So it's not that money itself, but it's this greed. It's this wanting to chase after things, to keep up with the Joneses. I very much have an aversion to physical things in terms of like, I need this or I need that. I need this to make me feel happy. No, it's like if I'm not feeling happy, that's an internal thing. Focusing on contentment instead of happiness, the value of pursuing a passion and setting goals for yourself. All of these sorts of things were just creating how I wanted to live, and how I thought would enable me to live in the world and to do good things and to achieve what I wanted to achieve. So, what do I like? Who am I? All of these sorts of things. All of this was done in this period of kind of 21 to 27, I'd say 28. Roughly around that period. In terms of Australians, I think this same sort of period is something that maybe we struggle with in general. Geographically and culturally, we are so isolated here. We do not have to think about global politics if we don't want to, because we've got oceans on every single side of us to the nearest, like big power or anything. It's not like we have melding and mergings like you would in Bulgaria, or a landlocked country which has people on every single side of it speaking different languages with different customs and things like this. I think the thing is, it's like a good and a bad thing. The good thing is, we don't have to worry about a lot of stuff. We don't have to really worry about being invaded. And even though we had some bombings in World War II in Darwin, so in the very north of Australia, that was a very small isolated thing compared to the rest of the country. So I think we try and make up for it by and large, as in the sense of being culturally and geographically isolated, in terms of having a gap year is very, very common instance here. So that is when you will graduate high school, and before you go to university, you go travel for a period of time. That's a very common thing to do. I did a version of that, except I was just 25 when I did it and had more money, so it was a lot more fun. We're pretty multicultural here, so even though I would say we're isolated in one sense, in that we don't get the full effect of like, this is what it's like to have a Ukrainian on your doorstep and their whole country on your doorstep. We do still have a lot of different foods here. Like, there's no real Australian food per se, other than meat pies and some desserts. Most things that people eat will be European pasta, or Mexican, i.e. Tex-Mex, or a lot of Asian foods, rice and stir fries and sushi and things like this. So yeah, it's kind of this weird mix where I think your average Aussie in this period of life, I think this is where you could get a little bit stuck in your own ways and maybe not have to go through this kind of personal growth and things like this, because we're kind of malleable, and we have had just forces directed at us which aren't these huge big ones, but they're real subtle. So it's things like American media dominates here. That's, in terms of Australian media, it's just a replica of America, and our culture is by and large a reflection of that. Things that happen in the United States, they tend to happen here about 4 years later. Asian immigration, so we do have that factor in here. You'll find Latin American pockets, European political system here. I've always struggled to describe Australian culture whilst overseas and as a real distinct entity. And I always thought that was because I wasn't observant enough. I didn't really know that much about Australia. I hadn't thought long and deep about it. But I'm starting to rethink this and actually go, you know what? I think the Australian culture is a bit malleable. I think it is a bit, it's not as distinct as I would say some other cultures are, like the American, like the Germans, like the Colombians, for example, or Argentinians. And so this is where it's kind of going like, knowing thyself, which I think is a very important thing for an average person to do. I think it's kind of hard for Australians to do just by and large in general, because I struggle to say that there's a real strong Australian culture when I compare it to other places that I've been overseas. And once again, this is just a nice lucky factor in me that I got the opportunity to travel, that I had, a lot of freedom to go for a long time and got to experience most of Latin America and really get to know what it is like there and just how different their lives are in terms of their financial systems, in terms of their political systems, in terms of their family and social systems and all these sorts of things. So that was a pretty important period for me, and I would say the best period of my life so far, in terms of, when you're a kid, you just don't really appreciate what's going on. Teenage years definitely sucked. I wouldn't go back to there, but I would relive at least portions of this time period, because I still have my problems, and a lot of it was finding out how to think and how to react differently. But it was really when I was 25 where I feel like I kind of solidified it as who as I am as Kyrin and knowing myself and things like this. And if you go back to the 5th episode of the Mere Mortals, so number 5, that was the whole point of that episode, just talking about what it was like to turn 25. Which gets us onto the last section here of solidification and stagnation. So, due to the above, I think I somewhat breezed through COVID. I kind of knew about myself. So I'm talking now from 2021 until the present day, and then we'll go into the future as well. I spent 2 to 3 years in a real slow, steady grind. I've talked about this many times. 2021 and 2022 were basically the same year for me. I really cannot separate those 2 years apart, which is really strange for me, because usually in life I have these distinct moments of like, oh, I remember what happened in that year. I remember what happened in this year. Big event, big change there. Those 2 years, they weren't wasted, because they were spent in a steady pursuit of goals. I really improved my Spanish. My handstands really improved. I made a great new friend group of handstand buddies. and it was just pursuing all of these individual little things, yet it kind of felt like I was stagnating in terms of many of the important characteristics, the things that I really value in my life, my 8 goals, which are related to, finding a long-term partner, to establishing relationships with strong relationships with friends and family, to getting my finances all set and in a way where I'm not likely to experience financial hardship, and to do well if I can from that, of contemplating spiritual things, of building up my character, of traveling around the world, of being able to create and make things better for my own. I called it just like general knowledge and skills, and all of these sorts of things I think really played a part into my general just disposition then, and of how I was, and of my health as well. That was the last one that I had on there. All of those things did okay, but I don't really feel like I grew as much as I did in that period from 21 until about 26, in comparison to of 27 until 31 to this current day. And this is where I'm going, like, it was slow, steady growth of some things, but I'm coming to the kind of conclusion that I've just been stagnating a lot recently, and I can't help but feel that I'm just waiting. I'm kind of like waiting on what's going to happen with my mum, and like, do I need to be in Australia? Would I be able to travel overseas? I'm waiting at the moment for just some wrist and elbow injuries that have been plaguing me the last year to stopping me from going after the one-arm handstand, like this dream goal I have in my head. I'm kind of waiting for like a bull market for Bitcoin and crypto for my finances. I'm waiting to find a girl. I'm waiting for like the network effects of the podcast to really kick up. It feels like I'm kind of just, I don't know. It feels like I'm not really doing much at the moment. Even though I'm doing things, it all feels a lot the same. And I'll talk in a second about that, but I kind of feel like I have 4 life paths available to me now. And I'm living in this weird section now where one life path is to go down the full freedom. I wouldn't call it hippie, but very alternative life. So go full in podcasting mode, wear just random clothes, not care about what, sports or things like that, or getting a house, or having a wife and kids, or getting a 9 to 5 and having a stable job and income, and going to barbecues with friends, and the kind of standard life that I guess my parents lived through, the Aussie dream in many ways, and just doing something completely radical, keeping myself as a nomad, of being able to travel whenever I want, of just maximizing for freedom in my life. That's one life path that's ahead of me. Another life path is to do all of those things, is to perhaps go back to an engineering job, which is a lot more steady. And, that way I might meet the kind of girl who I really want. The third life path is kind of where I'm at the moment, which is just alternating between them. It's so bizarre sometimes, of hanging out with my high school friends who are more on the 9 to 5 one, and then on the weekend hanging out with my PT friends who do handstands and are into the circus, and don't care about having a mortgage or a house, and more living in the moment, that sort of thing. And I'm jammed in between these 2 worlds, and I'm not really picking either of them. I'm trying to have my cake and eat it too, and just it feels like I'm kind of screwing both of them up at the moment, if I had to say. And I think there's a 4th life path, which is to be able to have my cake and eat it too, which is to be able to follow the podcast as a pursuit, but get real serious about it, to make it into a 9 to 5 job, to make it professional. And there is that opportunity available. There is the opportunity to travel and have freedom, but also to make sure that I'm being responsible with my family, to make sure that I am there for my mom and my dad and my brother if need be, and not be just gallivanting about doing whatever the hell I want. I think it's possible, and I think it requires more effort on my part, more thinking, and almost becoming kind of like a stronger person, of making decisions of, if I feel like I'm in a rut at this moment, well, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to change? Are you going to perhaps go to a new gym? Are you perhaps going to really take time off and go, you know what, I'm going to take 6 months off to let my body fully heal and not do stupid things and try and handstand even though you might not be ready? Are you willing to sit down and go, okay, how do I make the podcast into something financially viable, which can bring in, maybe it doesn't need to be a super steady income, but can bring in an income which would be able to sustain a wife and kids? Have you thought about how you're going to find this partner? Should you be doing more things like going out to more social groups, which are perhaps not your forte, but I was part of a run club for a bit and I made some friends there, and then just due to it being kind of far away from where I am at the moment and having to drive through peak hour traffic, and I fucking hate traffic, not doing that. Well, traffic is what a lot of 9-to-5 people do. Maybe you just have to put up with that, and that is part of your determination of living both of those worlds, and having your cake and eating it too does require some sacrifices. So I guess this all gets onto the Australian aspect, which is I feel we all kind of lost 2 years to COVID. That was just it was okay for me being solitude, working on something on a podcast where I didn't have to, I always had something to do. I always had work to do. And that was good for me. That was a okay, good time. But I think a lot of people didn't have that. And I'm kind of wondering, is this just me getting to an age in my life? I'm 31 now, so like early 30s, almost 32 in 4 months' time. And is this just a period of life where it's like, no, you've kind of solidified. You are going to become more stubborn, more grumpy. You are going to change less and be less malleable. And this is just a growing pain I'm kind of going through now. Is this just all in my head, and it's just some bullshit that I'm coming up with because, life is not as exciting and I'm not changing as much as I was when I was in my mid to early 20s. I don't know. We have access to so much opportunity here, and I don't want to waste it. I really don't want to live a life where I look back and go, you didn't risk it. You didn't put in enough effort to try and create the life that you wanted, and you had a substandard life. I don't want that. I really, really don't want that. And Australia is a pretty accepting culture, all things being considered. I think if you want to carve out your own life, if you want to be the entrepreneur and work 60, 80-hour weeks, that's accepted here. And if you want to laze about and be a beach bum and just go with the flow, you're also accepted here. And it's not like society really shames or pressures or pushes one way or the other. I think that's one thing about Australian culture which is pretty good, which is like we just don't care for a lot of things. We're content. Like we'll work hard, but also we'll want to enjoy the fruits of that hard work. And it's not like a constant grind of trying to keep up, of do better. And this is why, I think a lot of this is related to the weather, of just being in a sunny place and having good temperatures so you can go outside and hang out with your friends. You can go to the beach, you can go hiking, you can do all of these sorts of things. The best of times has been these kind of periods where I feel like I'm not doing anything, or I've reached the end of the stage of just putting in solid work and effort, because I can do that. But life passes you by really quick when you do that. When I was getting good at soccer, when I was going through uni and just focusing on uni and kind of like I was barely even knuckling down. Like I said, uni was never too hard for me. Those periods just flashed by me so quick, and led up to these periods where it's like, okay, you're now going to leave university and have to fend for your own. You're going to have to find a place. You're gonna have to rent it. You're gonna have to fill it with furniture or not. You can make the decision. You're gonna have to experience what it's like being in a workplace with a whole bunch of different people. You're gonna have to experience what it's like to have a girlfriend for the first time, for these sorts of things. And I feel like just this last period has just kind of been like stagnating, and I've put in a lot of solid work and effort, and I think I'm ready to do something new, to go. And like I said, I'm still kind of waiting on a couple of things. I still kind of need to see how my mum's going to go. Will I be able to travel to Brazil next year, early next year in April, like I'd really want to? Will my arms and my wrists, are they going to get better, or do I need to take real proactive effort and go, okay, I need to maybe get a stem cell injection. I need to completely stay off them for a while. I need to do more research and more forearm prep and all this sorts of things. I think I'm kind of getting to the stage where it's like this next year is going to be pivotal in some ways. Of, okay, you're doing okay at the podcast. You've got a loyal base. It's small, but it's growing. What if you invested 50 hours a week into the podcast? I don't do that much at the moment. It's probably like 20, 25, which is also getting to another thing I wanted to talk about. Was in the past I've mentioned, I'm kind of like a it's not self-made man. I've never described that, but whenever I was talking about finances, because it is kind of like a little bit of a black box. I can imagine you at home, you're like, well, Kyrin, just by my reckoning then, you haven't had a real job for like 6 years. Which is true, from the end of 2016 to the end of 7 years to the end of 2023. Be coming up on 7 years in about a month's time. And you go, okay, well, what have you done for money? Like, how have you sustained yourself that wise? And I've always said, like, I have my own savings, and this is true, but I look at a lot of things in my life and I go, you know what? I got given a huge leg up in so many different ways. Of my net worth at the moment, right now, I would say 1/5 of it was kind of given to me by family, as well wishes, as for doing good in university and high school and things like that. And even to this day, like, I live in a house that Dad has rented out to me, and it's like dirt cheap rent. So, I'm paying almost essentially nothing. There's so many things where I'm like, okay, I have always had like a little bit of, even just in terms of the safety net of when my mom and dad pass away, like there's a lot of wealth that is just going to go to me and my brother. Like I said, family wise, we're not that close with everyone else, so it would just go to us. I try and not let that get to my head of something that I can rely upon and things like that. And I certainly don't live my life as like a trust fund baby or anything like that. And if I did, my dad would certainly cut me off. But there has been this element of like almost 1/5 of my life has just been supported, has been kind of on cruise control. There's always been a bit of a safety net, and I don't know if that's played into my thinking that much, and that's just in terms of that's just in terms of finances. But even when I think of like, have I really gone all in on something? I took a pretty all in thing of traveling Latin America. That certainly was, of getting over my social anxiety. That certainly was. I don't know if I have something that I can go all in on at the moment. And maybe it's like I'm lacking a goal. Maybe I'm lacking that thing that really was such a pain point for me at different areas of my life. And I don't want to have to create one just to then fulfill it. But it's also like, I wonder if that kind of like 20% holding, that 20% support mentality has kind of affected me a bit, where I'm content to not get everything that I can out of life. And I'm a bit concerned about that. So what can you expect to sum this all up? I suppose living in Australia has been a blessing. It's an amazing, wonderful country. My life here in Australia was amazing and wonderful. And in terms of regrets or things like that, I don't really have strong, there's things I would have done differently if I could. And there's people that I hurt unintentionally or, should have known better. And I try to live a better life and be a better person than I was, but I don't necessarily know if I am. And that's not something to laugh at. It's a nervous laugh there. Australia was really good to me, and I think I've done okay, all things being considered up to this point. And I feel I'm ready for something new. And I'm living the worst of those kind of 4 life paths I talked about before. I'm living the worst one right now, which is just dicking around, stagnating. Nothing's happening. And choosing one of the 2 others, which I think would leave me ultimately unfulfilled, of the 9 to 5 or living the alternate life, would be better than this kind of current malaise that I'm in right now. But there is that 4th one, which I think I can do, which I think will work. But it requires some kind of like tough decisions and maybe even radical decisions on my part. I'm not going to stop doing the podcast or anything like that, but maybe it's like I need to distance myself from certain friends, or maybe I need to go out and create new ones. Maybe I need to put myself physically in just a completely different... I've been thinking about that, just where I'm located physically at the moment. It's not really near the city. Organizing, like, there's less serendipity in terms of just meeting people. All the people I meet out here are, they're mostly families, in the supermarkets, in the gym. Everyone's kind of in their lane a little bit and knows what they're doing. And I'm not sure this is the environment that's right for me either. All these sorts of things just playing around in my head. So I can't give any solid proof of what I'm going to do, but that's certainly going to be something I'm going to be thinking about a lot over this next month or 2. And I'll keep you informed. You'll probably notice it in the general topics we talk about, in the monthly goals and things like that. I know this was a bit of a ramble, but I wanted to kind of showcase a little bit of who I am, because you've heard about the Mere Mortals, you've listened to us a lot, likely if you've gotten to this point, and you probably know about me in terms of my characteristics, mentally, of the things I joke about, of what I'll say and how I consume things, what I consume, and that sort of stuff. But I think just giving a broad section there, I mean, this would be the perfect sort of thing for someone who ever wanted to interview me like I interview other people. Like, this is just a gold mine of information and things like that. So I thought I'd create that, put that out there. Next time I do a solo episode, I'll probably pick a topic which I know really deeply about, like handstanding or learning languages, and really dive into that again, like I've done in previous ones before. So I think I'll leave it there for today, everyone, and just say thank you once again for tuning in all the way to the end here. This is a value for value podcast. There's a bit of stuff happening in the chat. So this is Lucas here, and he says, boy, sorry I'm a bit late. The video is paused. Dang. All right. Well, that's not good. Shit. Okay. Well, I'm just going to have to upload that as a full one, right at the end. And, we'll just leave it at that, as a audio mostly one. But he was saying, you're more than a friend, bro. You're family now. Hompado. You're in the right track, definitely. Things happen at the right moment. Relax, bro. I'm still here. Thanks, Lucas, man. Really, really appreciate that, dude. Yeah, sorry about the video. Wasn't paying attention to that. Was assuming that it was still just going fine. Oh, well. So, yeah, that's one of the things I'd love to do. Love to go to Brazil and catch up with my friend Lucas and live the life of a Brazilian for a while, to kind of get me out of this malaise, to see things from a different side, to learn more about the world, learn more about myself, I guess. So, I'm just going to leave it there. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the end of this Musings episode. as I mentioned, is value for value. There's a lot of different things you can do to support these shows. First one would just be to share it via with a friend. Just say like, here's a guy who's just trying to live his best life. What do you think? Have you ever been in certain positions to like this? I'd love to hear from you. You can do that by just going onto any of the social links that are down below. Talent-wise, here's something that's new. So for the Mere Mortals book reviews, I'm kind of looking for someone who is willing to read off a couple of quotes that I would send to them each week, and I would then put you in the value block, the time split from that. It would only take probably less than a minute of your time to read off the quotes from books that I send you. I think that would just be a nice addition to, rather than me reading out them directly from the book, to have someone who's willing to do that. I think that'd be super cool. So if you're interested in doing that, let me know, please, and reach out, and we can get something cooking, organized for that. And then finally, you can send in some support to the show. I didn't talk about the PayPal before, but I checked that just before I started. We did not get any PayPals this week. So once again, you can be the first one. Just saying. And the link is down there in the show notes. If you want to support us, please go to meremortalspodcast.com/support, and everything is written there in terms of how and why you should support the show. And I really do want to thank everyone who has been doing that. Lucas in the chat, Peter sending a boost, all these sorts of things really do make an impact. Apologies if there was a bit of a rambly one, but I just wanted to get that off my chest. So thanks to everyone for tuning in, and I'll see you for the next time, hopefully with Juan. Ciao for now. Kyrin, out.